What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Wednesday, April 11th, 2018, hump day, middle of the weekday, starting that long, slow glide down to Pauhana Friday. We have a lot of very serious things to talk about today here. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air. And getting right on into it, obviously the situation in Syria is continuing to escalate. A lot of tensions on both sides, a lot of very provocative moves on both sides, a lot of tough talk on all sides, and in a situation where nobody is willing to back down, it does seem like we're headed for a major, major incident. The U.S. is reportedly considering a strike on 22 different targets inside Syria, including Russian sites. Now, this is a tremendous escalation because Russia has already said if Russian sites and Russian personnel are attacked, they will respond. And as we reported yesterday, there's this Navy P-8 surveillance aircraft has been orbiting outside Tartus and Latakia, which are areas where Russian logistics ships are being located. So it looks like Russia's in the crosshairs, and that is a very, very dangerous situation. Now, apparently, Israel is pushing Trump to take action in Syria, but then Israel is always pushing the United States to take action against Israel's enemies. They certainly were out there cheerleading the war on Iraq. And the idea that it might actually risk a conflict with Russia is apparently irrelevant. And as I said the other day, I think that Israel would not be unhappy if the U.S. and Russia destroyed each other in a nuclear exchange, because that would leave Israel and their nuclear arsenal in charge of the Mideast and through control of the oil flow for pretty much the rest of the world. And it's not, Israel's used the United States up. They've bled us dry. There's nothing left. We're an empty husk. So Israel would not hesitate to sacrifice us for their own particular ambitions out there. And they're still out there pushing this gas story. Oh, it was a horrible thing. And here's the lie they're trying to get you to believe. Assad had all but won the war in Syria. ISIS and Al-Qaeda, supported by the U.S., are on the run, and we're expected to believe that Assad would attack a hospital full of children with poison gas, knowing this would allow the U.S. to reinvade his country. And if you got to be some special kind of stupid to believe that one. And yet that's the lie they're putting on out. And it's almost like the United States doesn't care anymore. Oh, big deal if you know we're lying. What are you going to do about it? The elections are rigged and we've got all the guns. Now, U.S.-led coalition warplanes have been seen flying over the Iraq border. And civilian planes are being ordered to clear the airspace over Syria by the U.S. military for at least 48 hours. And if you go over to Flight Tracker, you'll see that already the main air travel corridors on the eastern part of the Mediterranean are being moved away. They know something's coming. They don't want the civilian aircraft to get hit, because civilian aircraft do get hit by military missiles. The United Nations says there have been 25 such incidents, the vast majority of which are still highly classified, like TWA 800. Now, the Syrian pro-government forces are already evacuating the airports and the military bases. They're dispersing across the country because the personnel are much more important than those facilities. They're probably dispersing their aircraft to other fields in order to not have a concentration of targets where the U.S. can hit. But if the U.S. is planning strikes on 22 major targets, it looks like they're going after Syria's entire military. Now, Russia is again reasserting that any U.S. missiles fired at Syria will be shot down and the launch sites will be attacked. That includes those Aegis ships out there in the eastern Mediterranean. Now, a Russian fighter jet carrying Kh-35 cruise anti-ship missiles has been spotted flying over Syria's Tartus. So they're getting ready. and that KH-35 is something that, like Russia's modern missiles, it flies very low to the water, very hard to pick up on radar. It's maneuverable in the terminal phase, and it's going to be very, very difficult to stop. Now, U.S. warplanes are flying close to the Russian air base in Syria, in Latakia and Tartus. So they're rattling their sabers well and true. So we've got these U.S. destroyers and submarines with missiles near Syria. And we've got the USS Donald Cook, which is the ship which the U.S. government now denies that this ever happened. But the story went all around the world where this Russian ECM aircraft paralyzed it up in the Black Sea. Supposedly traumatized the crew. Russia issued a commemorative coin about it. Got to admire their style there. And there's also the USS Carney, which is a guided missile destroyer. The USS Porteris is en route or already there. There's another guided missile destroyer, the USS Laboon, also somewhere near the eastern Mediterranean. Now, these 4 guided missile destroyers together can carry up to 240 Tomahawk land attack cruise missiles. And the Tomahawk can deploy a nuclear warhead. Now, there are 2 submarines in the area, the USS John Warner, which is a Virginia-class fast attack submarine, and the USS Georgia, and that is the real interesting one. The USS Georgia is designated as an SSGN, G as in golf, Sierra, Sierra, Golf, November. Now, this is an old Ohio-class ballistic missile submarine, but because of strategic arm limitations treaties, 22 of their 24 missile silos have had the Trident ICBMs removed, and they've been compartmentalized into 7 compartments, each of which holds a Tomahawk land attack cruise missile, for a grand total of 154 Tomahawk missiles on that one ship. It's called an arsenal ship. And that, if this gets into a real ocean-going battle, that is going to have to be a primary target for the Russian forces, because it carries a lot of firepower, and again, we don't know what, if any, of those Tomahawks are tipped with nuclear warheads. Another little bad sign here. First of all, we're going to do a shout-out to our honor affiliates rejoining our network. There's been a very, very alarming development. This is coming out of Sputnik News. And apparently, over at the Civ Mil Air Twitter account, which monitors airplane movements, they're reporting that the Boeing E-4B Night Watch, commonly known as the Doomsday Plane, has taken off from the Wright-Patterson Air Base today and flew towards Springfield, Illinois. And what is curious about it is the fact that it left the airbase minutes after U.S. President Donald Trump made his threat to launch a missile attack on Syria. Now, this aircraft is the Boeing E-4 Advanced Airborne Command Post. This is an upgrade from the older kneecap aircraft, which is at the top of the airborne command and control structure for nuclear war. Yesterday, it was reported that 4 of the E-6B TACAMO aircraft were in the air over the United States. TACAMO is an acronym for Take Charge and Move Out. This is the 2nd level of communications for National Command Authority, which are the guys with the keys to the nuclear weapons. Now, the E-4 and the E-6Bs can stream these very long wire antennas out the rear of the aircraft, and they can use extremely low-frequency radio waves to communicate with submerged U.S. submarines and send them the codes to launch attacks. This is the heaviest of the heavy artillery. Now, more than likely, this is an attempt by the United States of America to bluff Russia into doing nothing following the coming attack on Syria, which apparently includes Russian bases. But this could backfire. This is high risk. This could scare Russia or another nuclear nation into launching a preemptive nuclear first strike out of fear the U.S. government is about to do the same, because the U.S. government has not been displaying a tremendous amount of restraint and sanity and rationality lately. We know from Paul Craig Roberts there has been talk in Washington, D.C. of just hauling off and launching a nuclear attack on Russia without any warning, and it stands to reason there are probably hardliner counterparts in the Kremlin who are trying to advise Putin to do exactly the same thing. This could very quickly spin out of control. This is very alarming. And by the way, all of these aircraft can be refueled in the air so they can stay up as long as they need to. All right, let's take a phone call from Dustin in New Jersey. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, I was going to mention the Doomsday Plane Night Watch is up, but the Russian one's up too now.
Yeah. Oh, I hadn't heard that. Well, it would stand to reason. Russia is going to match what we're doing with. This is insane. I mean, we've seen this situation in so many movies, where we get right to the edge of Armageddon, and now it's for real. Whether it is Sum of All Fears or Dr. Strangelove or any of this stuff, this is really happening.
By dawn's early light, Mike.
Say again?
By dawn's early light.
Yeah.
For the day.
It's insane.
Well, Mike, I got some more bad news, but 11 of the Russian ships have left the port of Tartus. So they're moving out. And Theresa May, looks like she ain't getting approval. She's moving submarines within range of Syria. So, Mike,
Well, hang on. Before you go any further, Russia claims that the ships they are deploying from Tartus are just out there on an exercise. But what they're doing is they're dispersing the fleet. They don't want to have them all caught in the harbor when the U.S. attack happens. My guess is all the ships are putting out to sea and spreading way out so that they can only be attacked one at a time. My guess is probably all the aviation is in the air, going to interior dispersed airfields, small airstrips. When they were getting ready for the attack on Pearl Harbor here on Oahu, they were trying to send fighter aircraft to all these little dirt strips that had been set up all over the islands to just keep them from being in one clump when attacked. So yeah, everybody's making all the preparations you would expect to see for an outright conflict to start.
But they did leave one Kilo class at port. And then, did you hear about General Votel, who's the chairman, one of the commanders, I don't know. He's like canceled, CENTCOM commander, canceled his appearance in New York City, Mike.
Okay, that's not good.
So, yeah, I don't know, Mike. There's a lot of submarines out there now. I mean, you got the British, the Germans, the Israelis, the United States, the Russian. There's a lot of stuff moving around, Mike.
I'm surprised the British submarines are there because Theresa May's been pulling back, saying that she does not want to commit to attacking Syria until there's some actual proof, first of all, that a gas attack actually did happen, and that if it did happen, that Assad had anything to do with it. And maybe Theresa May is still bruised from the embarrassment over the Skripal case, or maybe Theresa May is just realizing this could get out of control, and Britain could get nuked if this insanity goes any further.
Yeah, Mike, real quick on those KH-35s, they're also land-based, so they got a lot of them.
Yeah, they're a very flexible missile. They can be launched from aircraft, land-based, ship-based, just all kinds of, yeah, it's a very flexible platform.
And that sub, yeah, you're right. That sub needs to be one of the primary targets. I hate to say it, but yeah, it's carrying a lot of arsenal there.
Yes, it is. And again, the unknown question is, are any of these Tomahawks nuclear tipped? Okay, I guess we just lost Dustin. All right, let's get on back here. Now, interestingly enough, even as the Doomsday plane is in the air, the TACAMOs are in the air, everybody is running around screaming, ready for war, the U.S. is still saying they haven't officially confirmed the Duma chemical attack or that Assad had anything to do with it. But obviously we know Assad is an evil person and we're getting ready to go. But Mattis is out there saying we're still assessing the intelligence. They don't have any intelligence. They can't get in there. Basically, the U.S. policy seems to be ready, blame, bomb. When the government declares a verdict before there is an investigation, it proves there's a pre-existing agenda. We saw the same thing on 9/11. Before the buildings had even collapsed, they were out there saying, oh yes, it's Osama bin Laden. We know it's Osama bin Laden. We're going to have to go into Afghanistan to get him. It's a repeating pattern. So the U.S. is getting ready to invade Syria as punishment for these atrocities allegedly carried out by Assad. Apparently, all the evidence they need are allegations, and all the proof they need is an accusation. It's a return to Code Napoleon. And they're risking this really spiraling out of control, because I don't think Russia is going to back down if the U.S. attacks Russian facilities in Syria. Putin can't back down. His own hardliners would kick him out of office, and they'd turn the key. Anyway, Syrian and Russian jets are crowding the coastal provinces in response to the U.S. threats. They're flying combat air patrols. They've got aircraft in the air at all times. They're getting ready for this. Meanwhile, story out of Zero Hedge, the Saudis prepare for regime change in Syria, which tells you that is the real agenda. The U.S. has been trying to get Assad out of Damascus for 7 years now. And so they keep coming up with these lies about poison gas. And by the way, in none of these cases was it ever actually proved that Assad had had anything to do with it. Assad surrendered all of his chemical weapons. Who has the chemical weapons? The U.S.-backed terrorists. Over and over and over again, as their bases are overrun, they're finding U.S. chemical weapon precursors, Saudi chemical weapons, Israeli weapons, Israeli rations. Now, the Syrian opposition, the people who've been on the verge of being kicked out of Syria, are already coordinating. And they're saying that following the U.S. strike, when they're expecting the Syrian forces to be in a state of confusion and chaos, they're all ready to go on back and recapture the positions they've been kicked out of. So that's what this is really all about. It's got nothing to do with those poor children in the hospital. And by the way, again, why would Assad gas a hospital full of children? What does it get him? Absolutely nothing. That target was picked to elicit an emotional response, to garner sympathy. Oh, look at the poor children as we hose them down and spray them with, asthma medication. No, don't you just feel angry? Don't you just want to get Assad? No, because the story that Assad did this does not make sense, and it never did. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Peter in Los Angeles, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, still here. Hey, listen, I just wanted to point out that that of the three major players here, two of them are irrational. One is completely batshit crazy, and that's Netanyahu.
Yes.
And completely desperate, backed into a corner. Trump is sort of being backed into a corner here as well. Putin is the only only rational actor amongst this group, and the chemical attack would have been, of course. I don't believe Trump really wants war with Syria, but he's kind of too weak to stop going with the flow. But somebody obviously planned this out like they planned the ones before.
Yes.
This has been orchestrated from, so who orchestrated it? Is it the U.S. military? Is it the intelligence services? Is it the Israelis? And of course, we have the drum beaters, the people, the echo chamber, and the media that is echo chambering all this, and the Democratic Party, and all these people are saying, if you don't do this, this is the worst. You're a sellout, and this is unbelievable. And the build-up to this point has been going on for a year and a half.
Oh, it's been going on for longer than that. Like I said, Syria is a major embarrassment for the U.S. They've been in there for 7 years, and they haven't been able to win. And so now this is the full court press. They're going to just go in and smash the place on the basis of what everybody knows is a lie. And that is going to present an image of the U.S. government to the rest of the world as very dangerous and unpredictable. Peter, stay on the line. I'm going to come back to you after these commercials. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're still talking with Peter in Los Angeles about this insane situation in Syria where the U.S. government or some allied party has concocted this nonsensical claim that on the verge of winning the war against the U.S.-backed terrorists, that Assad would do the one thing that would allow the United States to claim the high moral ground and go right on back in with a massive, massive attack, which seems to be what's shaping up here. So, Peter, I'm almost at a loss for words on what to say about this. We see this in movies and TV shows, and now all of a sudden it's really, really happening.
The audience, I know you understand, and a lot of the audience does, but George Bush the first, when the wall came down, pledged that we would not expand NATO to the east. But then Clinton came in and expanded into Poland and Hungary and Romania,
yes,
and Bulgaria and the Baltics, and then of course we invaded Afghanistan, we invaded Iraq, we took down Libya. Syria has been an ally of the Russians since the 60s or 50s actually, what Putin is a rational guy, but how long are you going to stand still for this? And what must his generals be saying? And this is all carrying out the plan. I mean, why are we in Syria? We're carrying out these deranged neocon Israel first expansion in the Middle East and fighting all Israel's neighbors. And here we are. 3 weeks ago, we killed 300 Russian contractors, right? 3 weeks ago. Israel's bombing with impunity. And they're saying that they're going to wipe out. They're very careful not to mention the Russians, but they're saying, well, you know, we just took out this Iranian air base where we hit it hard and killed a number of Iranians. And if anybody responds, if you shoot our planes that are bombing you, the Israelis are saying, we're going to wipe out every Iranian base in Israel. So, you know, there's...
You mean in Syria?
Yeah, in Syria, I'm sorry. The Israelis are threatening to... And, of course, the Iranians aren't doing anything to the Israelis. It's the Israelis bombing the Iranians in Syria. It's the Israelis and the Americans and the Brits who started this civil war, ginned up the civil war in Syria. And you know, all these people, I mean, the Iranians, you know, there's too many players and too many irrational players. This is going to be war. There's something, a spark will happen. There are too many deranged players here. And that's the way I see it.
Well, my concern is because this claim of this attack in Duma has fallen flat on its face, that the U.S. may be getting ready to launch a chemical weapons attack against our own people here in the United States of America and say, oh, this was Syria, this was Syria. They're not going to back down. They can't back down. The U.S. government is committed to this war agenda. Their first loss ends the whole thing. They can't turn around and say we were wrong. The economy would implode immediately. The economy is being propped up by those investors who think in the long run there's going to be a world war, the U.S. will be victorious, and they will share in the plunder and the loot.
And Mike, where it links, you're right about the possibility of a false flag, the same people that carry on all these false flags in Syria and everything. They're here. There are guys, or they're Israeli. And you know what? They will not stop at that. And that makes it all the more imperative that Trump has to root out and do it immediately. These deep state neocon, Israeli first or, you know, warmongers who've gotten us into this life or death situation for the entire planet.
Well, I'll tell you, if we do see a nuclear exchange between the U.S. and Russia, I would not be surprised if Russia took out Tel Aviv, because everybody on the planet knows that all of this warmongering and corruption and subversion of governments is coming out of that one city. And once the missiles are flying, all bets are off.
I'll tell you what Trump should do privately, because you can't trust the Israelis to not start something. He should take Netanyahu aside and says, if anything gets launched from you guys or on us, well, you know, and because of your actions, we will nuke you ourselves. So you better behave yourself.
Never going to happen. Never going to happen. The U.S. government is totally under the control of a foreign power called Israel, and that is the absolute reality. And Donald Trump, for all of his talk about peace when he was campaigning, for him to come on out and talk about Assad is an animal who enjoys gassing his own people is utterly ridiculous. I mean, look at what Israel is doing to the Palestinians down on the fence with Gaza, and we don't get a peep from Trump about that. So Trump is fully co-opted by Israel, and that, unfortunately, is just the reality. Peter, we're going to let you go. We got to take another break for commercials. We have another caller waiting on the line, and we'll be back with this doorbell to World War III after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Let's go back to the telephones. Jim in Chicago. Aloha, Jim. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Michael, what I find very disturbing, when I turn on the television or the radio, or even read the mainstream media, what are they talking about? Stormy Daniels, Michael Cohen, Paul Ryan resigning, and sports. Little or nothing about the situation in Syria, and also little or nothing about what Donald Trump tweeted out this morning, which will cause a major, major war down the road. I remember what happened in 1962 with the Cuban Missile Crisis. What's happening today is worse than that.
Oh, yeah. No question.
You know, and, you know, when you mentioned about the Brits, I was reading this morning where in Cyprus, they have an Air Force base there, and they have those tornado jets, and they're on alert right now. They're saying when they get the order to go to Cyprus, they will be dropping bombs. Syria, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Everybody's at war. It's kind of hard to keep them all sorted out here without a scorecard. We know that Turkey's been talking about attacking Greece and or Cyprus. Turkey's really the loose cannon on the deck in all of this. But it's just, to somebody like me, who just wants to live my life and take care of my wife and, you know, do music and do film production and the rest of it, this all just does seem incredibly insane. That we're on the verge of the incineration of the surface of planet Earth, ultimately in an argument over whose brand of ink and paper we're supposed to use for money for the next 100 years. And if that does not fit the definition of psychotic behavior, I don't know what does.
Yeah, Michael, but how do you explain the mainstream media talking about Stormy Daniels, Michael Cohen, Paul Ryan, or sports, and little or nothing about Syria?
Well, because they know that the public is not buying the propaganda, and the public is opposed to more wars, and so they're basically trying to keep the American people distracted until the war is actually underway. At which point it'll be too late for the American people to stand up and demand that we turn around. I mean, somebody actually wrote an article saying, why are we still talking about, you know, Zuckerberg when we're on the threshold of World War III for real? But the corporate media's job is to basically distract and disinform the public, and that's exactly what they're doing. And the American people do need to be paying attention to what's going on between Trump and Russia and Syria. They need to pay attention to the fact that the Doomsday plane and the Takamo planes are in the air, and according to the caller, the Russian counterparts are also in the air. That's like one code number away from the missiles flying.
Right. Well, this is why I listen to you, because I can get the truth and also other information. You're not going to find that on mainstream media. So, Michael, I'm going to let you go and let other callers get in there. Take care and God bless.
Thanks an awful lot. I don't even call them the mainstream media anymore. If you look at their audience and readership numbers, the mainstream is here. And I don't call us the alternative media because there's a negative connotation to the word alternative. We're the independent media, and we're the new mainstream. And that's the reason why you've got politicians out there in California trying to say, oh, no. If you've got a website or a blog, you've got to let the government approve what you're saying. No, government-approved news is just propaganda. The government approved all the news in the old former Soviet Union. They approved all the news in Nazi Germany. We don't want to have that here, but it does seem like that's what they're trying to get to. Okay, back to the telephones. Terry in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, Peter seems to have a pretty good handle on what's going on. But here's one thing that I think happened when Trump announced he was pulling out of Syria, of course, he had that meeting with Netanyahu. And Netanyahu, one of the real things behind this is the Genie Oil Company in the Golan Heights. And if you know anything about that, of course, Israel's drilling oil and Syria stealing the oil and selling it. And they've done some recent estimates on how much is down there, and it could rival Saudi Arabia.
Oh, there's a lot down there, yeah. And Israel wants the Golan Heights. And yeah, as soon as Trump started talking about pulling on out, Israel hit the panic button, because once the Syrian war is over, Syria is going to come on down and say that Golan Heights belongs to us, the oil and gas belongs to us. Believe it or not, talking about chutzpah, one of the reasons this war against Assad got started is that after Israel discovered all that oil and gas was down there under the Golan, they demanded Syria grant them a pipeline right of way so that Israel could take the oil and gas they're stealing from Syria and pipe it across Syria to sell it in Europe. And of course, Assad said, no, we're not going to do that. That's ridiculous. You know, that's like somebody coming into your home and stealing your TV, and you hold the door open for them while they take it on out to their truck. And that's one of the many reasons why this war in Syria was started. And it's dragged on for all these years. And Assad has basically held on to the nation. He keeps winning his elections. The Syrian people love him. And all the U.S. keeps doing is they keep changing the reason we're in there. Oh, Assad is gassing his people. All right, people aren't buying that. We're just in Syria to get ISIS and Al-Qaeda. ISIS and Al-Qaeda are almost gone. All right, Assad is gassing his people. They just keep flipping back and forth. And that's what has undermined the credibility of the entire U.S. government approach to Syria. We keep seeing them change their story. And it's very obvious what the real agenda is. Saudi Arabia just confirmed it again. They want to regime change Syria. They want a U.S.-friendly government in Damascus that will basically sell Syria's oil only for the U.S. dollar and allow Syria to be used as the front porch for the coming war against Iran.
Yeah, in addition to that, you know, there's the Genie Oil Company wants to explore beyond the Golan Heights borders, you know, in South Lebanon. They think there might be a lot more oil over there. And if you look at the board of directors for Genie Oil Company, you've got ex-CIA agents, you've got Mary Landau, who's getting a payback for being friendly to the oil companies and when she was in the the Senate. And then there's a Rothschild is on that board of directors. Mm-hmm. And then there's the big one of the famous names is Dick Cheney. He's on there, you know. So anything he is involved in has got to be shady. He does, you know, he's not even thinking about us. He's thinking about him, you know, what he can do. He's egocentric just as bad as Netanyahu is. But in addition to that oil company, of course, Israel wants to expand the Israeli borders out to the Greater Israel Project, which includes a lot of Syria. And that's part of it, too. So I can only imagine the pressure they put on Trump after he made that statement about withdrawal.
Yeah, well, you know, it was reported Trump basically called him up on the phone and just read him the riot act.
And threatened him, you know, other things, too, probably. And probably saying, hey, you're going to have, if we don't get this oil from South Syria, you're going to have to start paying us more. You know, I don't know. I'm just in fantasy there now.
Well, no, that's very realistic. You know, something good happens, Israel wants more money. Something bad happens, Israel wants more money. The sun comes up, Israel wants more money. The sun goes down, Israel wants more money. It rains, Israel wants more money. It's sunny, Israel wants more money. I mean, we have seen it over the last going on 70 years that Israel, far from being an independent state for the Jewish people, basically survives by looting and plundering other nations around the world. You know, screaming, Holocaust, Holocaust, you owe us, you owe us. I'll tell you who owes who. Israel should owe the rest of the world that got together and stopped the Nazis from completing whatever it is Israel thinks they were trying to do. But we never hear any expressions of gratitude from Israel. Maybe it's because they know there really isn't anything to be grateful for, that it was all just as fictitious as Saddam's nuclear weapons.
Yeah, we're talking about that. You know, Obama increased the money going to him like $700 billion a year. I think, no, not a year. But,
no, it's not that. I think it's 30 billion over 10 years is the last figure I heard. But, you know, that's the official number. But the U.S. gives a lot more to Israel kind of under the table. One of the things that the U.S. does on a regular basis is they'll build a whole bunch of weapon systems, aircraft, troop transports, whatever. They'll build more than the U.S. needs. Then they'll declare the leftovers as surplus and sell them to Israel for pennies on the dollar. This is brand new hardware that the American taxpayer paid full price for, and our government sells it to Israel at a steeply discounted rate. It's just another way of plundering this nation for the benefit of Israel.
Well, on that point, Jim Trafficant said Israel's getting closer to 15 billion a year when you figure all that. And another answer might come if they ever are able to audit the Federal Reserve. You're going to find some phony stuff in there, too, and I'm not sure that Israel might not be the beneficiary of that.
Well, I'm sure of that, too. But another thing the U.S. government will do is Israel will borrow money from the U.S. government, and then somewhere down the road, Congress will have a late-night vote forgiving the debt, saying to Israel, you don't need to pay it back. It's zeroed out. And so Israel gets to say they've never defaulted on a loan to the United States, even though they've never actually paid any of that money back. I mean, it's just crookedness after crookedness after crookedness.
Well, you saw what happened to Jim Trafficant, right? They came up with this charge, and he went to prison for 5 years or so. And then when he got out, he started talking more, and then he had all this big mysterious accident happen on his farm where he was found underneath his tractor. You know, and there's a lot of people that have reservations about that, me included.
Oh, yeah, no question about that. Absolutely no question about that. You know, it's like all these biological scientists, biowarfare scientists. Apparently, there was an activist against the GMO mosquitoes, has just been found dead in his swimming pool. We live in an age where the government and corporations are behaving like organized crime. They don't like you, they're going to rub you out. Michael Hastings appears to have been the victim of a cyber hack attack on his car to make it look like it was a traffic accident. These are very, very dangerous times for anybody who is out there trying to get the truth out to the American people.
I'm not sure the KGB and the Soviet Union are much worse than we are now.
I'm not sure that they were. I think right now the U.S. is the evil empire and its allies.
Yeah, evil empire includes Britain, United States, Saudi Arabia, and Israel, those four countries.
All right. Anyway, Jim, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go and switch over to Terry in California. Aloha, Terry. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
We lost Terry.
We lost Terry. All right. Getting on back to the news. I'm looking at the story that just now the second came in from Russia Insider. I haven't even had a chance to post it. But apparently, French President Macron is literally begging Russia not to retaliate when France attacks Syria. Talk about chutzpah. You know, we're going to come on in, we're going to bomb the heck out of your ally. Please don't fight back at us. I mean, that is utterly, utterly ridiculous. Of course Russia's going to fight back. Russia can see very clearly it's time to draw a line in the sand. If they don't fight back against this Western incursion in Syria, they're going to be fighting against the Western incursion in the suburbs of Moscow. And the Russians remember just how close to Moscow the Nazis got in big mistake number 2. They're not going to let that happen again. And that's another reason why this current chest beating and forehead butting is incredibly, incredibly dangerous. All right, let me go ahead and put this up because this is important. I mean, this is ridiculous. Please don't fight back at us when we bomb your people. It's like Twilight Zone stuff here. All right, all right, that is up now. As soon as the cache clears, it will be available on the main page. Getting on back to the news here, let me clear the chat log on our little phone system here. Now, as global outrage mounts over the Syria chemical attack, or it's a faux outrage over a faux Syria chemical attack, China is warning against military action, saying it will lead us nowhere. And China is absolutely right. And we need to be very, very careful. There are a lot of articles out there talking about how other governments are saying this is ridiculous, and yet they're always written to try and resell the idea that there actually was a gas attack and that it absolutely was Assad who did it, and it's so beyond question, you would obviously be a traitor to your country to even question it. Now, we're getting mixed signals from Great Britain. Story coming out of Russia today. Theresa May, hesitating to join Trump's attack on Syria, wants more evidence. This is coming out of the London Times. And of course, that would be the appropriate cautionary path to follow. And yet, on the other hand, we're hearing that British submarines are now close enough to the Syria coast to launch their own cruise missiles for the coming bloodbath. And it looks like this is going to be a massive attack. It's not just going to be an airfield. They're going to use the pretext of this, gas attack on this hospital full of children to basically just smash the country. And maybe this is going to be the U.S. government's object lesson. Don't think for a moment we're no longer the global dominating power. We're going to prove it by absolutely crushing Syria. But as I said, that could backfire and cause other nations to just launch preemptive attacks against the United States. The United States is seen as a rogue nation. We're not the leader of the free world. We don't even really have any friends. We have allied nations who are unable to refuse us, but that's not the same thing as a friend. All right, let's take a couple more phone calls here. Al in Canada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. A couple of people have mentioned things about Israel, the amount of money, our U.S. dollars, and military surplus, military equipment that gets sent there. One of the things that fails to get mentioned is, Israel reverse engineers this stuff, and then they turn around and they sell it.
Yeah, and they make a huge profit because they're not paying the R&D costs. The American taxpayer is.
Got that right. Mike, I have a couple of very quick questions for you.
Sure.
Who runs the system in the United States?
I'm sorry, who runs what system?
Who runs the banking in the United States?
Well, in theory, it all descends from the Federal Reserve, which is the ultimate bank of last resort for banks that need additional cash. And so there's the Federal Reserve at the top of the peak in Washington, D.C. Then there are the regional feds spread across the country, and ordinary depositor banks go and deal with them.
The people that are running the banking system in the United States are Jewish. Media is run by Jewish people. Hollywood is run by Jewish people. The Federal Reserve always has a Jewish person at the head.
All right, well, I hate to interrupt your rant, but we have to take a break for commercials. Thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go, and we will be right back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And I'm looking at this little article where apparently John Bolton seems to think the Constitution does not apply to the ruling class. That is precisely who it was written to control. The Constitution is not about what the people can and cannot do. It's about what the government can and cannot do. But we have seen this attitude coming out of the government for a long time now. They don't want to be constrained by the Constitution. They just want to do what they want to do. Sig Heil, Sig Heil, Sig Heil, Sig Heil, Sig Heil. All right, let's go back to the phones here. Steve Elkins, welcome back to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, Mike, I see this being played out just like the George W. Bush playbook on weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. I predict that they're going to strike.
Yes.
Actually, they will strike Syria. I think they will capture Assad. He'll go on trial, a very speedy trial, just like Saddam Hussein did, and I think they'll probably put him to death. And this seems to work. It worked last time, and I just hope the American people are smart enough to see how this is all playing out. This thing was a false flag. We know it's a false flag. But I see him going straight from that playbook. It worked last time, and
I disagree. I disagree. It didn't work last time. The American people realized they had been lied to about the nuclear weapons and the chemical weapons, and it's the reason why the U.S. government has had such a terrible time selling subsequent wars. The American people are skeptical. They're suspicious. That's a very, very healthy thing. I disagree that it worked last time. I mean, yes, the war went forward and they did get rid of Saddam Hussein and they did put Iraq's oil back on the world market for the dollar. But in terms of getting away with it in the eyes of the world population, no, complete and utter failure. And so is this one. The rest of the world is looking at the U.S. government and saying...
we got it later on, but you realize that there was no accountability. All they had to do is claim faulty intel. They haven't done that this time, but they claimed faulty intel with the George W. Bush administration, and that seemed to be like, well, we meant well, but we got it wrong. And so if you mean well, mistakes are made, and there's no accountability. I hope this doesn't go forward. I see this to play out pretty much the same way. I mean, General Wesley Clark said, 7 countries, 5 years, Syria and Iran's on there. And you're right. They'll invade, they'll conquer, they'll take it over. They'll have military bases there, and the next step will be taking Iran over. And Israel will certainly push the United States to do that bidding for them. They'll manufacture something else, or weapons of mass destruction, or that nuclear bomb is almost done now. We have to take them out. And then the Middle East will be complete for them.
The only problem with that is that Russia and China are realizing they can't play appeasement any longer. They're looking back at World War II and the hideous mistake made by Neville Chamberlain, and they're understanding they can't just give in to the United States anymore, because it doesn't matter how many nations the United States government gobbles up, 30 minutes later they're hungry again. So I think Russia would rather fight the United States in the Middle East rather than on their own doorstep. So I think this is going to spiral out of control. And I think ultimately the U.S. is going to lose this one. Even if it goes nuclear, they're going to lose this one.
Okay. Thanks, Mike.
All right, we got to take a break here for station identification. Got another caller waiting on the line, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. And before we get to the phones here, I'm getting all these emails. Apparently, one of our listeners posted a video. Mike Rivero talks with Wolfgang Halbig, and it was taken down by YouTube, and they got a strike against their account for that. In another email I got, apparently the Russia Insider website is under serious distributed denial of service attack, along with other sites like Fort Russ and South Front. So the information war, we're being jammed. It's just like the Nazis used to do when the German people wanted to get the news from all around Europe. Germany would actually jam certain frequencies. It was even more insidious than that. Germany loved the fact that the German people had radios, because that was how the Fuhrer communicated with them. And it was psychologically very powerful when you were listening to the Fuhrer on your radio in your home. That awareness that everybody else in Germany was listening at the same time had a tremendous psychological pressure. And following the World War II and Operation Paperclip, the U.S. government started basically developing how to use media to manipulate people. But Germany, in order to get the radios into German homes, subsidized the manufacture of a very inexpensive radio for the German people. Call it the Volksfunk or something like that. Same thing they did with the Volkswagen. The problem is the radios were designed only to tune in a very narrow range of frequencies that represented the German media. And then when anybody else was trying to broadcast on those frequencies without government permission, they were jammed. We're starting to see the same thing here. We're seeing exactly the same thing here. It's another harbinger of a new world war. Because in any war, truth is always the first casualty. All right, let's take a phone call. Andrea in Oklahoma. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes. Aloha. I think it would be very beneficial for everybody to take a look at the documentary on YouTube, The Corporation Nation, as well as the great pension fund host. Our country, with all its tax that it gets from we the people, has invested in every large company out there, Apple, Microsoft, Exxon, even the banks. They've invested They have so much money invested in every bank that they can sit on the board of directors and they dictate what goes on. They have large stocks and all these, where they sit on the board around the world. They own stocks in China. They own the banks all in the world, all over, in Europe and China and everything. They make everything happen to what they want. They owned BP when BP had, so it was America owning, and they dictate what these companies do. They tell them where to go. They owned the stock in Hershey's, and they dictated that they wanted them to move to China. Hershey didn't want to move. They are dictating everything. Our country is hiding trillions and trillions of dollars. They're not hurting for anything. And these documentaries will show details how the money is being put, and it's not just our government, it's every state. Every state is claiming to be broke, is not broke. They have trillions of dollars. They can fund everything. They're hoarding it. They're like got the money.
Okay, Andrea, it sounds to me like you have been reading those comprehensive annual financial reports, which seem to indicate that the federal government and the states have huge amounts of wealth. But you need to remember that that particular document is basically including the value of non-convertible assets, buildings, roads, pipelines, and things like that, that really are not sources of revenue. The reality is that under private central banking, debt builds faster than the available money supply. And that's why everybody living under a private central bank is in debt, and the debt keeps growing and growing and growing and growing. And we know that the U.S. government is very reckless with the money. We know that the Pentagon has misplaced $8 trillion. There's no idea where it went, probably into a lot of people's pockets. Same thing that happened to all the money we sent into Iraq for rebuilding or Afghanistan for rebuilding. Hardly anything got built, and the money just simply disappeared. They don't care. It's not their money. And there's just so much of it, they adopt this very lackadaisical attitude towards it. You know, oh, so we misplaced another couple of $1 million. Who cares?
But no, if you had $500,000 and you invested it, you would get dividends off. If you never touch the principal, you get payments monthly off that money, like $5,000 off. If you invest of $500,000, you'll get $5,000 off of it as dividends every month.
Yeah, but you're forgetting the effects of inflation. There's always going to be inflation. That's another inevitable outcome of private central banking that comes out of monetizing the debt. And it may look like on paper that you still have a $500,000 plus the accrued dividends and everything, but when you map it back to its actual purchasing power, you'll find out that you're not able to keep up with the rate of inflation. That's one of the big lies of a savings account. The reality is that if you have money in a savings account and the bank is paying you interest on it, which less and less banks actually are now, you're still losing real purchasing power. Okay, Andrea?
Important. Yes, I think that they could watch the Corporation Nation and the Great Pension Hoax, and it's very important. I think we all need to become enlightened, because we're talking, they're still paying millions and millions to the investors and fees that are investing it in all the companies that are investing it.
Yeah, it's scams and corruption, and it has been for a long time. Anyway, Andrea, got to let you go. Got callers loading up the phone lines. We're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network, and then we're going to go to John in Tennessee. Aloha, John. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, just to stay current, I want to give you the Bible prophecy that I just heard 3 hours ago. So this is the Christian Zionist thing, the whole we're loyal to Israel because Jesus was a Jew and all this garbage. Are you familiar with the Club K missile system?
Not really. I do need to start studying up on all these weapons again, obviously.
Okay. Well, Okay, if you look that up, you'll find out that Russia is the chief exporter of the Club K missile system. The other thing is the radical Islamic terrorist, the man who was heading up Saddam Hussein's nuclear weapons of mass destruction program.
Yes.
Apparently, the company owns a port in the United States, and now he's making a bid for the port of Wilmington, Delaware. And the council there is about to approve it. Okay, so this guy's going to own 2 ports in the United States. And then the third thing was that Russia, I guess they helped out Venezuela when Chavez was gone. And
Yes.
apparently Russia owns 50% of Citgo now. So Russia has been running tanker trucks all throughout the United States. So the Bible prophecy scam is that God is going to let America get wiped off the map so Russia can move in and attack Israel, but then God's going to miraculously save Israel. And of course,
Okay.
this is great. The Christians don't need to do anything like the founding fathers. They don't need to take a moral stand on this because they're all going to get raptured out of here anyway.
Well,
Isn't that
after they get raptured out, can I have their car and house?
I think you can.
Okay,
I'd be
good.
But if I find an empty one, I'll pay for the plane ticket for you to come over to the mainland.
Yeah,
and move in.
I need a bigger place with a studio where I can have lights and a proper camera and a green screen and everything like that. Anyway, John, thanks an awful lot for that wonderful insight. And we're going to switch over to Mike in Kentucky. Aloha, Mike. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I've listened to you for a long time, and I didn't know you were a white supremacist. Now has a story out that says the white supremacists are all defending Syria and what's his name, Assad.
Oh, man, that is a real reach. That is a real reach.
Yeah, well, it's also on a story today with some kind of cosmic gorilla effect. Are aliens right here among us? I thought Haaretz had some credibility.
Apparently not. Apparently not. They've descended into tabloidism. I mean, I used to have a lot of respect for Haaretz, but they're almost as bad now as some of those British tabloids, where every once in a while there'll be some real news, and it's surrounded by all these thumbnails about, you know, these scantily clad supermodels and actresses and everything.
Well, they're going all the way back to 1981 with a photo from Reuters over Vancouver Island in British Columbia showing some hubcap in the air that they say, is it a flying object, like a flying saucer or something? But that's right there today. And before I could leave their webpage after glancing at the one about being a white supremacist if you support Assad, that story popped up. Wait, don't you want to read this too?
Yeah.
It's just sad, and that's, you can't, that propaganda's so thick you can't spread it on toast.
Well, you know, they can't sell the story about the gas attack. Nobody is buying it. So, yeah, it's going to be personal attacks now. Anybody who questions the official story is a traitor. Anybody who supports Assad, as you say, is a white supremacist. It's all ad hominem attacks because they don't have anything else to sell this with. They're raising on a busted flush.
Let's just hope there's no fake Israeli satellite TV uplink trucks roaming around America with a missile launcher in them ready to pop up an EMP about 300 or 400 miles above Kansas.
Well, don't forget there's still that unexplained radioactive emission coming out of Israel's New York consulate. And remember when the Nuclear Emergency Search Team was developing their baseline maps over metropolitan areas so that in the event they were trying to track a rogue nuclear device, they would already know what was already there, and they could pick out the one that was brand new and moving. And it turned out that there's a great deal of radioactivity around the New York consulate of Israel. Israel, of course, would not allow anybody in to see what it was or inspect it. And the speculation is that all the way back during the NUMEX scandal, which is when this company was reprocessing nuclear waste back into usable fuel, a huge amount of uranium went missing. And it is basically suspected that most of this material wound up in Israel as the fuel for their first generation nuclear weapons. Now, what would have been very trivial for Israel to keep some of that uranium here in the United States of America with which to fabricate a bomb. And once you've got the fissionable uranium, making a bomb is actually easy. A uranium bomb is basically a long pipe, and there are two subcritical masses of uranium at each end. You slap them together, it goes bang. That's the secret of a uranium bomb, the little boy bomb. And so, plus there's that, apparently a nuclear weapon went missing during that Minnow Air Base thing that was happening all the way back during Iraq, where this aircraft took off with 6 nuclear weapons on the wing pylons, which is not how you transport them. And when it finally arrived where it was going, there were only 5, and the flight crew died under questionable circumstances shortly thereafter. So there are some nuclear weapons running around loose and unaccounted for. What is really ironic, do you remember when George Bush outed Valerie Plame as a CIA agent? She was working for a company called Brewster Jennings and Associates, which was a CIA front for the CIA's operation to try and locate and identify all nuclear weapons on the Earth. And they wound up being shut down. And so George Bush, in order to get Valerie Plame, literally removed our ability to find out who does and does not have nuclear weapons. I'm sure they've rebuilt the capability since then under some other name, but who knows what nuclear weapons changed hands during that transition interval.
Samson options, what comes to my mind. They have the satanic mentality of if they can't control it, they're going to destroy it. That's pretty dang satanic, if you ask me.
Yeah, for a country that likes to pretend that they're following nuclear ambiguity, they keep making these statements about, we can nuke Europe, the Arabs may have all the oil, but we've got the match. I mean, just all this very arrogant, reckless talk.
Yeah, sad. It wouldn't. 2 or 3 nukes strategically placed could, because of the cascading effect of our industrialized world, it just, smoldering and blowing up would kill the planet. You don't need a full-out nuclear exchange between Russia and Soviet. Whatever they are now. Russian coalition and the U.S. Could certainly destroy the world, but I don't think you need a full-out nuclear exchange to do that. 90% of America, our government's own study, would be dead in a year without an electric power grid. And that filters on over into Europe and on around the northern hemisphere when that happens.
Well, we don't need to go into the fine details. I'm sure that we can all agree that World War III is a really, really bad idea. That's why we include it in our show logo and as one of the rotating banners at whatreallyhappened.com. It's a bad idea. But the people who are all in favor of this, they've all got their bunkers. When things start to really go south, the president goes to Mount Weather, Congress goes to the Greenbrier, Congress goes to this place in North Carolina, the something lodge, I forget what the name of it is, but they've all got their little boat holes. And I'm sure they're all dreaming that they'll stay down there for a year, eating all this preserved food and water, recycled water and everything, and they'll come up and the planet will be green and beautiful and wonderful to live in. No, it won't. They'll come up to an absolutely dead world and they will starve to death. Anyway, listen, Mike, we're going to let you go here, and we're going to take another phone call from James in Ohio. Aloha, James. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, on that nuclear subject, WikiLeaks just released some of Bolton's emails, including a partial discussion between him and Trump, and one of them was particularly depressing. It said, "Mr. President, I'm not saying we wouldn't get our hair mussed, but something about 10 to 20 million killed tops, depending on the breaks." I'm just kidding.
That's actually a quote from Dr. Strangelove.
Yeah. As far as autism, you talk about autism a lot, but it amazes me how the public misses about half of the implications of any issue I wanted to mention quickly. Autism is primarily caused by damage to a part of the brain called the cerebellum. And thing is, when Hans Asperger wrote his paper in 1944, it was on autistic, what he called autistic psychopathy. Mm-hmm. When you damage the cerebellum in such a way as to change behavior, it's like drawing a line on a piece of paper in the middle. It's standing the pencil up on the point, letting it fall. On one side, it results in being too passive, which is most of the time autism. On the other side, it ends up being psychopathy and narcissistic personality disorder. I just emailed you a link to the perfect video to understand all the implications of this. It's Mike Ross interviews Sam Backman.
Yeah.
It's called Sis or Among Us, but there's a few little audio problems at the beginning. It's 45 minutes, but if you want to understand, I mean, for the skyrocketing numbers of autistic people, we also have skyrocketing numbers of psychopaths and narcissists. And according to Backman, who's a diagnosed narcissist himself, these are becoming a spectrum.
Yeah. It does seem like we have a lot of crazy people on this planet. And again, a lot of it may tie in with those prescription psychiatric medications. We may literally be in the process of drugging the entire human population into psychotic behavior, which, of course, is just going to shove us toward war that much more quickly.
Talked last week about glyphosate. Well, the thing is, cerebellum, if you read a neurology text, it's only about motor control, but Dr. Robert G. Heath discovered in the 1950s that it's also very much about behavior and diminished cerebellar volume and activity.
Yeah, this idea of discrete locations in the brain is kind of going out of fashion. James, we got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, Jeremy Corbyn is demanding Parliament vote on the military action in Syria. Apparently, he's trying to head off the possibility that Theresa May will be arm-twisted by Donald Trump into committing British military support for the attack on Syria, and Corbyn wants to rein that on in. Somebody just sent me the results of a poll. Do you support Theresa May committing to bombing Syria? 86% said no. So the British people aren't buying this any more than the American people are buying it. We ran a poll at whatreallyhappened.com, and it was over 90% no, where we shouldn't be going into bombing Syria. Now then, I want to back up a little bit here to the pitch, the beg that you heard over the break. As you can tell, we're literally in a war against war. And the people who want the war, they're trying to shut the independent media down. You've got that ridiculous law that's being proposed in California where anybody running a website physically in California, which thankfully I am not. I'm located in Hawaii and my server is in parts unknown. But if you're running any kind of a system in California, which are most of the big social media are in California, then you have to allow government-approved fact checkers to determine whether stories regarding things like vaccines, medicine in general, government policy, war policy, have to be approved by the government or they're not allowed to go on the internet. So they're trying to turn the internet into another version of the controlled media like the corporate media is. And so it's a fight. My server is getting hit with attacks again. Somebody just wrote on in and said it looks like somebody's trying to interfere with the YouTube video feed. The other side likes to play dirty. And the other side, unfortunately, has got a huge amount of money behind them in the expectation that victory in war will bring huge profits. And we here in the independent media who are trying to prevent this war, at least in my case, because I think the United States is going to lose this one, we need your help. It's never been more serious. And it's hard for us to help, to ask for your help, because we understand you are all in the same dire financial situation that we all are. Governments that go to war, governments that are acting contrary to the interests of their own people, deliberately drive the population down into poverty to keep them weak. That's why there's been an attack on the middle class. Opposition to oligarchy arises from the middle class because they have got the wealth to finance political action committees, new media, and so forth. So we really need your help. If you are able, the address to send a check or money order, or if you prefer anonymity cash, and I know a lot of you do because I get it all the time, bills wrapped in tinfoil. The address is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number, if you want to become a recurring subscriber, is 800-724-2719, extension 03. If you want to donate to whatreallyhappened.com, and it is needed, welcome, and greatly appreciated, you can go to the top of the webpage and over in the right margin, there's a little donate button that you can click on, and you can help us out that way. We're in a fight for the future, not just of the United States of America, but the entire world. So the network thanks you, and I thank you. And we're going to start a phone call with Veronica in Iowa, and I'm probably going to have to take you through the next commercial break. But what's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. I'll make this very short. I'm a huge Gary Larson fan, and when you said,
Yes.
President, Congress, Senator are going to come out of these bunkers, there's not going to be anything left, immediately his cartoon, and it's that scene, everything's gone, and the guy's standing there going, thank God, Sylvia, we're alive. There's nothing left. And you've got to see this cartoon just,
I have seen it. I'm a big Gary Larson fan, too.
Yeah, he's tremendous. But, so that I think you'll really appreciate that one, and I do appreciate everything you do. And I'm going to try really hard to send a donation. I'm on disability, so it's pretty skinny here, but you're worth it.
Well, thank you very much, and I do appreciate it. And every little tiny bit helps. I did a variation on that same theme, where there's this one soldier standing amid total desolation of his destroyed city, saying, we did it, Jesus. We've gotten rid of all the infidels. I'm the last person left on earth. You're supposed to take me up to heaven. Jesus? Jesus, are you there? Hello? Hello? And it is that absurd. But, there are even some Twilight Zone episodes from the original Twilight Zone that are coming back. That's how close we are to this insanity. Anyway, listen, Veronica, thank you very much for the kind words. Thank you for the donation. We're going to take another break for commercials. Back with more news after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And we're talking about Syria. Everybody is talking tough. Russia has just announced that they will attack any missiles or aircraft coming into Syria, and then they will attack the launch points, which means those Aegis ships, possibly the USS Georgia, if they can locate where it is. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin is telling Israel to just stay out of this. It's really none of their business, which is not going to stop Israel at all. And if there is going to be the use of nuclear weapons, I expect it might be Israel that uses the first one. And then says, wasn't us, we don't have nuclear weapons, which everybody knows is an absolute lie. Mordecai Vanunu revealed Israel's secret underground bomb factory underneath the Dimona reactor. And when the former government of South Africa fell, the new incoming government found documents showing that Israel had tried to sell a nuclear weapon to the former government of South Africa, the very activity the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty is supposed to prevent, which Israel still refuses to sign. Now, the Deputy Secretary General of NATO, Rose Gottemoeller, says that they categorically want to avoid a confrontation with Russia. Well, it may not be up to them, because under Article 5 of the NATO Charter, an attack on any one of those nations is an attack on them all. And all the NATO nations are committed by that treaty to come on in and help the U.S. and Great Britain give Russia what for, even at the risk of having nuclear missiles rain down on their countries. Now, the Russian military has now secured the area where this alleged chemical weapon attack took place, and they're opening up what they call a safe corridor for the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons personnel to get on in and investigate the area and take samples. Now, the United Nations voted down all three of the measures that were going to call for an investigation of what actually did happen, but Assad basically said to the OPCW, come on in anyway. You don't need the Security Council. Please come on in. And the Russians are already in the area. Their biological warfare experts are taking samples. They cannot find anything. They visited the hospital in Duma, including its basement, where the original White Helmet report said there were mountains of corpses piled up. And there wasn't a single corpse and not even a single person who came in for treatment for chemical weapons injury after this supposed attack. It didn't happen. They've made it up out of thin air, and they're risking World War III over this lie. Now, I don't know what's going to happen. We're obviously all very concerned. But whatever does happen, it is important for those of us who are looking back on these times from the future to remind everybody this was all started by the United States of America with a lie. Just like they started the Spanish-American War with the lie about a Spanish mine in Havana Harbor sinking the USS Maine. Just like they escalated the war in Vietnam with the lie about torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin. Just like the U.S. got us into World War I with this lie that the Lusitania was just an innocent passenger ship, when it later came on out it was in fact smuggling weapons to Great Britain. Just like how the United States got us into World War II by goading Japan into the attack on Pearl Harbor and then claiming it was a complete surprise. And of course, how we got lied into the war in Iraq with all the stories about nuclear weapons. That's how the U.S. government gets into wars. They lie about it. And we have to keep reminding the future that that's how the United States started all these wars. With lie after lie after lie after lie. And frankly, I consider that the highest of the high crimes and misdemeanors any ruler can commit, to lie to their people to trick them into a war of conquest. Now, interestingly enough, over in Russia, their spokeswoman, Maria Zakharova, is expressing concern that when the United States launches their missiles into Syria, they may set one to hit that site in Duma where the chemical weapon attack took place in order to prevent the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons inspectors actually verifying whether or not something actually happened. And I would not put it past the U.S. government to do precisely that. You know, oh, the site's been blown up, one of our missiles went off course, you know, just take our word for it. We wouldn't lie to you about this. We're the U.S. government. We never lie about anything. Now, over at Washington's blog, they have an article by Francis Boyle, who's a professor of international law at the University of Illinois College of Law. He's been around for a very long time. He writes a lot of really good articles. And he's out there saying that if Donald Trump attacks Syria on the basis of unproven allegations, without the permission of Congress, without a UN Security Council resolution, it is an impeachable act. And in this case, I concur. If Donald Trump goes forward with this attack, I support his impeachment. Not because it will change the deep state agenda, but because we the American people have to start sending a message to the rest of the world that we are not in agreement with this. Look at how the people of Germany have been stigmatized for generation after generation after generation with this idea that they all stood in line and supported Adolf Hitler. Actually, a lot of people did not. They were kept quiet by fear of the Gestapo, fear of the SS, just a desire not to have their lives disrupted, and they lost their country for it. We cannot afford to repeat that mistake. We cannot afford to be silent. We have to speak out. We have to send this message to the rest of the world. We know the U.S. government is lying to start another war. We do not support it. We're doing everything that we can within the letter of the law to stop it, but our elections are completely rigged, so members of the government are immune from the will of the people. And that's just where we are. All right, let's take another phone call. Mark in Georgia. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I was wondering, I don't remember the source, but I remember reading an article. I don't remember breaking down the original German of what Hitler actually said vis-a-vis what they if I understand correctly, basically the media, newspapers, the radio, claim that Hitler said war is inevitable, when what he was really trying to say was your political leadership, these criminals in your political system, they are making war inevitable, which is two entirely different things. The difference between Ahmadinejad saying that the regime occupying Jerusalem should vanish from the page of history versus wipe Israel off the face of the map. It's a complete misrepresentation of what was actually said.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, I don't know if it's still there, but there was on YouTube the actual video of Hitler's speech, along with a translation underneath of what he was saying. And obviously, anybody who speaks German could validate the translation was accurate. Adolf Hitler did not want war. It was forced on him. And if you go and read my article, All Wars Are Bankers' Wars, you will see in there how Great Britain wanted the war because Germany, following the abolishment of their private central bank, their economy lit up. They called it the German miracle. Germany was reindustrializing, and they had become serious competition for Great Britain, which was still laboring under the private central bank, the Bank of England. They didn't nationalize it until after the end of World War II. And the reality is, nations that are entrapped by private central banks cannot compete with nations that are free. And so all during the 1930s, Churchill was on the radio saying, Germany is bad, Germany's a threat to our economy. If we don't deal with them now, we will have fought World War I in vain. And again, you need to remember that World War I actually began between Serbia and Austria-Hungary, and somehow Germany was made the enemy because they were an economic threat to Great Britain and the United States, because they made really good products that the world wanted to buy, and Britain and the United States could not compete with them.
Neither in terms of quality nor in value, in terms of price versus, if you have a choice between some cheap piece of crap that can barely hold together until the warranty expires versus having, say, Craftsman that has a lifetime warranty, you'd rather have the thing that's got a lifetime warranty, that even if you do have a problem, you take it in. But the thing is that's what's been disappearing in the United States.
Oh, absolutely. Every time I have to replace one of these computers, I'll go on down to Best Buy and say, I need a durable, reliable machine that will last a long time. And I'm willing to pay extra to get it. And the salesman looks at me with this deer in the headlight look and say, no, there is no such a thing. All computers, will burn out after 3 to 5 years. And then I'll say, I have a Commodore VIC-20 from the 1970s that is still running. So don't tell me that these things cannot be built to last.
And the thing is, if they're built in a modular structure where you have, say, a video card that goes bad, you replace the video card. That's the handy thing about desktops is they are a lot easier to replace the bad component, even if you have to replace the motherboard. But the thing is, technology marches forward, and the more compact they make things, there's complications in that direction, but still, they could make things a lot more reliable and a lot more repairable. But still,
yeah, but that's not the business model. The business model is to sell you something, you use it for 3 years, you throw it away, you buy the new one, and it just keeps the money flowing into the companies. And even the new, more modern desktop computers, all the graphics and everything are on the motherboard, and they've taken out the slot where you can add in additional accessory cards. It's an all-in-one machine. The only thing that you're able to do is add more memory to it. And it really does make it very difficult. We can't configure the machines to do what we need to do. The attitude of the computer companies is, we know what's best for you, just buy our machine, and we guarantee that it's what at least the majority of you want to see happen. That was part of the design logic behind Windows 10, which I loathe. I absolutely loathe it. I have one Windows 10 machine that I bought to support my work here in the studio. I still haven't plugged it into the audio chain because it is just that much of a pain in the neck to try and get it to do anything.
Open source is a whole lot more superior.
Yes.
And that's the thing. And going back to the original subject, basically the thing is, I think you might like what I call it is American deceptionalism. When they say, well, American exceptionalism, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, excuse me, yeah, based on the idea that the official account has to be true because might makes right. And that's the fundamental problem is, no, your account is not honest and it's not true. And, you know, when I'm being fair to people that are being vilified, I'm not, you know, there was this movie, Denial, where they slandered David Irving as, you know, I remember at one point they said, oh, this guy fell in love with Hitler. It's like, no, he was just being fair that Hitler wasn't really the one creating all the problems. The problems were these various people doing things that really were not right. And the thing is that all the blame was, it's a lot easier to vilify an individual and say, this one individual is the problem, like that scene in Saving Private Ryan where the sniper of the group said, sir, if you're asking me, you get me within a mile of Hitler and, you know, pack your bags, boys, the war's over, because I'll take out Hitler and that's the end of the war. It's like, but that's not the end of the war because you still, you know, you're dealing with this figure as though that's all there is to it, and that's not all there is to it, right?
No, there isn't. A lot of people forget that after Hitler either committed suicide or killed a lookalike and left for parts unknown, Admiral Dönitz, who was the head of the U-boats, basically became the Führer. And there was actually a second Führer, and he basically negotiated Germany's surrender.
Yeah, and there was that's one thing I respect about David Irving is he looked at how unfair and biased things are. Like, basically the Allies had captured 10 tons of documents, and they sifted through everything, and the only thing they allowed the defense to see was the documents that seem incriminating when you look at them in isolation, but it's like, yeah, but what about all the documents that said that we intended to feed and clothe and take care of these, you know, basically slave labor inmates? You know, we intended to take good care of them, and you people came in and did all these things, and it's like, this is a situation you people thrust on us because you destroyed our transportation infrastructure, and obviously when you have a large fraction of the farming, the farming sector of the economy is being conscripted, yeah, you're not going to have as much food to go around. Like, duh, really?
Well, you know, those pictures of emaciated people in the slave labor camps, that wasn't due to starvation. It was due to the typhus epidemics that swept Germany near the end of the war, which apparently the German soldiers who were retreating from Russia brought it back with them, and whether they simply picked it up naturally or the Soviet Union had weaponized typhus is unknown at this point. But it absolutely ravaged Germany. And that's why everybody was looking thin and emaciated like that, because of the typhus.
Yeah, and that you know, that's the thing is that the uphill battle we're up against is people have this delusion that we're the good guys because of this dishonest narrative. And, you know, I understand your reservations about the bad side of religion are well noted. I am completely with you about people abusing religion to force their own thing or to be exalted in the eyes of people who ought to know better, whatever. But there is an all, you know, in my view, there is an all-knowing creator, and he sees through all those lies. That's where, when I agree with Thomas Jefferson, I tremble for my nation when I ponder that God is just and his justice will not sleep forever. And you try to explain that to these people who are so enamored with this lie. Well, you hate this country. It's like, no, I love God, therefore I love humanity. Yes, I love the people in this country, but it's for that very reason that I detest how evil is packaged to look like good, as though because of this dishonest narrative, therefore we're the good guys. And it's like, yeah, but it all falls apart when you realize that if all along the Taliban was right, for all the nasty, vile things that were said about the Taliban, if they were right all along when they said the reason why we can't hand over bin Laden is the body of evidence you people gave us does not prove that he did it. And that's why we can't hand him over to you. And, you know, and that's where people become like, the Taliban is evil and bad. And it's like, well, if they're as evil as...
We don't see that as much anymore. People have been burned enough, they've been made total fools of by their own government enough, where they're not ready to just grab that first belief. except for those who are in denial, and that's a shrinking minority. Anyway, Mark, we got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials. We got a bunch of calls waiting on the line, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we're going to go back to the phones. Vivian in Canada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, hi, Mike. My question is about the military. No matter what the plans or the strategies, ultimately the final actor is the military. What happens to the men and women serving in the military that they obey orders that they know may precipitate a domino effect that will ultimately result in the destruction of, if not the entire planet, certainly a significant portion of it? Is it part of their training, or is it that they're so isolated from one another that they can't coordinate a resistance? I mean, throughout history, we've always heard of incidents where the army or the military has refused to follow the orders of a tyrant or an emperor. What's happening today with modern-day military service personnel?
Well, I don't know the situation in the Canadian military, of course, but in the U.S. military, because of the Nuremberg trials, it is actually coded into the Uniform Code of Military Justice that our rank and file service people do have a right to refuse an order they consider to be illegal under international law. And unfortunately, though, those that do are subject to a tremendous amount of harassment. Lieutenant Aaron Watada, of course, is a good example of how that can happen. And of course, part of the military training is to basically brainwash these soldiers and airmen and sailors into thinking they're right, the other guy is wrong. They're constantly propagandized to think that they're on the side of right, and the enemy is this dehumanized bunch of slants or krauts or gooks or hajis or whatever. And so it's a huge amount of brainwashing that goes on to make the military obedient, because you need an obedient military to be effective. There's this wonderful line out of the movie Crimson Tide. It's delivered by Gene Hackman, who's playing the commander of a U.S. nuclear ballistic missile submarine. And he says, "We're here to preserve democracy, not to practice it." And that is the attitude within the military.
Right. But with regard to your comment about not knowing about the Canadian military, I don't know either. I'm only from a distance, but my feeling is that I've seen so many U.S. military making announcements out of Halifax and other Canadian centers. I'm convinced the Canadian military is under the control of the U.S. military, and we know who the U.S. military is serving. There are two other things that were brought up by your previous caller that I just have to comment on. It's not religion that divides people. It's human nature, because if it were not religion, humans would find some other reason to attack one another. Somehow it seems to be intrinsic within the human DNA that we're aggressive and acquisitive. And perhaps that's why it isn't history that repeats itself, but we're in a cycle of following the programming of our DNA. And today it's complicated by modern techniques of brainwashing. And I hearken back to reading once Nick Begich's
Okay, Vivian, I'm sorry, I got to let you go for station identification. The problem is we are evolved from the apes, and we carry those ape instincts with us, and that is ultimately our doom and downfall. We need to evolve past that. We'll be right back after station identification. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And before we take more of these phone calls, somebody just sent in a very interesting email saying that the USA can't solve the Las Vegas shooting, they can't solve the Seth Rich murder, they can't solve the first female Muslim judge found dead in a river, can't put Hillary in jail, can't find trillions the Pentagon lost, can't find both rear-end cheeks with their own two hands, but they know for a fact that Assad used chemical weapons 7,000 air miles away. That really cuts right to the heart of it, doesn't it? All right, let's go back to the phones here. Mo in Florida, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. Can you hear me okay?
I hear you just fine.
Yeah, you got some great callers. That lady from Canada was brilliant. But if I can follow up on that, you know, I don't know if you remember that experiment they made with, they put a rat in a cage, and they gave it an electric shock. by itself and kept shocking it until it just accepted it because it couldn't do anything about it. And then they put another rat in the cage, and they did the same thing, and eventually they attacked each other. One killed the other one because it perceived the other rat as the one that was causing it discomfort. And sometimes I think that's exactly what they're doing. What I'm trying to say, Mike, is, back in the, 40, 50 years ago, before the internet, we didn't have this information. But what is the excuse for people now for following this Zyocon? I call them Zyocons.
Yep.
It's and the neocons together. Everybody knows this Syria thing is BS. But yet, Tucker Carlson's the only one that has stood up, as far as I'm concerned, and called it for what it is. But how do you explain this? Is this just mass hysteria? I mean, it's so obvious that Assad wouldn't gas his own people. He's got nothing to gain, and Russia's not going to back down. It's like it's a mass hysteria. But what's the excuse?
Well, it's not a mass hysteria because, again, the polls are showing that ordinary people here in the United States and in Great Britain and pretty much every place else that's involved are overwhelmingly opposed to this. What we have are a bunch of these neocons and warhawks with dreams of glory and having their name in the history books for fighting World War III, and they're going to have statues raised to their glory, and pigeons everywhere shall rejoice. They're caught up in this whole idea that this is a chance for them to really change the history of the world and get their name in the history books, and to get very, very rich in the process. And that's really what it's all about. These are sociopathic personalities, and unfortunately, because sociopaths are such excellent liars, they tend to get into positions of extreme power, which they seek because of their sociopathy.
Yeah, John Bolton is the poster boy for that.
Absolutely.
I don't know, Mike. It's so obvious. It's like, what? You have no excuse anymore. All you got to do is, the information's out there. I mean, you do a fantastic job of consolidating it, and you're fearless. And Mike, I love you, and Claire, and I just hope for the best. I know Russia's not going to back down. If they back down, they've lost face. And I don't know if they're like China, but this is not going to end well.
No.
I live 6 miles from a nuclear power plant. I'm not worried, but I'm worried about the next generation because I'm about your age, and it's just this is just so, it's surreal, isn't it?
It is surreal. I mean, my home overlooks Pearl Harbor, which if this thing goes nuclear, it's going to get hit. And Claire and I have got a bug-out kit in the car, and we've got a plan to get to a very deep canyon that's very near our home. If we start seeing the Aegis ships firing off their missiles, but if that happens at 1 in the morning and we're asleep, the hard reality is that if a nuclear war starts and it spreads to here in Hawaii, well, Claire and I are not going to have to worry about our retirement anymore. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about having your kids either. That was a blessing in disguise, Mike, and I appreciate it. Thank you, man.
All right, thanks an awful lot here. We're going to switch to Rick in Arizona. Aloha, Rick. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike, you hear me okay?
I hear you just fine.
Yeah, okay. Hey, I heard all this before with North Korea. And, going into Syria would almost be at the same level as bombing runs into the motherland in 1944. They have a sophisticated Air Force that's bunkered in, and they took out the Israeli Air Force 10-1 back in the day. So this is very complicated. I think what we'll see, if anything, is Trump lobbing a bunch of air balls across the Mediterranean, and he'll hit the targets like he did the last time. This takes way too many troops, and if there was anything that really happened, you would see unusual activity around the military bases here in the United States. And Jamie Kelso lives in Grand Fort, and if this thing goes nuclear, he'll be able to see those B-52s, and he'll hear them screaming out of the Air Force base there. I think we're overreacting. This is all talk, just like with North Korea. I think this has to do to please investors. They're losing money, and they got to put on a show. At least they're trying to help them. And who knows how far the banks are into this stuff over there. This is all about pipeline construction. And so we'll see. But I think it's as fake as, wag the dog, man. I mean, if there's a
I disagree. I disagree. I don't know. I mean, we know that the Harry S. Truman Carrier Battle Group is on its way across the Atlantic to go to the Eastern Mediterranean. That's a huge amount of force there to join what's already there. And again, I think the U.S. Is going to use Syria to set an example. Do what we say or we will smash your country under the flimsiest of pretexts. In fact, they may have gone with this ridiculous gas attack knowing that nobody would believe it just to send that message. We're going to come and smash you whenever we feel like smashing you. But I don't think Russia is going to back down. What I'm hearing now is that the British submarines are now within missile distance of Syria, and the latest word is the attack is going to begin tomorrow. Now, I don't know how reliable that is, but there's too much assets there for them to sit and do nothing. If Trump just throws a few missiles after all this preparation, he loses face. If Putin refuses to respond to the attack, he loses face. And at this point, they painted themselves into this hideous corner. Well,
I think that our military is a glass cannon, and we're going to find out. If that happens, those carriers and those battleships can go to the bottom because they have the equipment to sink them, believe me. So, I don't know. Thanks for taking my call, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network, and we're going to go to Jeff in Georgia. Aloha, Jeff. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, Michael, great show. I got two things. One is just a little history. You know, from the Balfour Agreement in World War I, Neville Chamberlain saying that Roosevelt and Jewish power caused England to go to war, and that is written in the James Forstall's diary forever. Joe Kennedy told that, he was the ambassador to England, told that to Joe Kennedy. And Benjamin Freeman in 1961 at the Willard Hotel said that Jewish power was somehow tied to World War III, that we were in the middle of the Cold War. But I want to say this, and this will sound nutty. June 6th, 2018 is 50 years that Robert F. Kennedy, who was going to be president, who was for peace, was assassinated. 50 years. I'm going to write. I have written the Kent Center. I have written Mayor Landrieu. I have written many writers on the. I want to call for a march up I-75. I think Georgia is the appropriate state because it's home of the great Martin Luther King. And we need to march up I-75, and we need to overthrow banking. We need to march up to CNN in Atlanta. And I want to get nuns, priests. I want to get the most radical people, the Farrakhan's, the David Dukes. I want anybody that is for peace to say we can work it out. We have to overthrow the banking power because they're the reason. Today it's the WASP, the puppets. Tomorrow it'll be somebody else. But the ultimate power rides with the Jewish cartel. And I do not. I resent people saying I'm anti-Semitic. If I went after the Italian mafia, I love the Italian people. I love their food, their culture, everything. If I went after the Ku Klux Klan, that is not me not going.
Okay, you're starting to drop out. Jeff, I have one comment here, and this is addressed to everybody who calls into the show and says the Jews this and the Jews that. First of all, not all bankers are Jews. Yes, a lot of them are, but a lot of them aren't. I prefer to use the category money junkies because that is much more inclusive of all the different people who are involved in that, and it's a much more accurate description. And it is no secret that bankers love wars because wars plunge the people and the nation further into debt to the bankers and they make more money. War is the bankers' richest harvest of debt. There was a movie that came out a while back called The International, and it was loosely based on the BCCI scandal where this bank was caught in basically buying up small arms manufacturers around the world. And these investigators are trying to find out what's going on. And they're talking to the head of a major bank and saying, so are they buying up all these arms to control the outcome of the conflict? And the banker says, no, no, no. They don't care which side wins or loses. They're basically, they want to control the debt the conflict produces. That's the value of a conflict or a war, is the debt it produces. And we've talked many times about this three-step scam, if you will, that the bankers perpetrate on the people. They'll set up a private central bank. They'll start putting out this pretty printed pieces of paper, and people will have to borrow those pieces of paper at interest to conduct their business, to build homes, to buy cars or whatever. And the people will borrow and borrow and borrow until they cannot borrow anymore, because all of the economic activity is spent paying the interest and repaying the principal on all those loans. At that point, the Keynesian economists say the government has to keep borrowing on behalf of the people and without their permission to keep this little pyramid scam going. So the government will borrow and borrow and borrow until it reaches the point where it can't borrow anymore, which is where the U.S. government is right now. And it's at that point the bankers will try and gin up a war, because once there's a war, all normal economic and fiscal restraints come on off, and the government just has to borrow vast sums of money at usurious interest rates to fight the war. And after the war is all over, they have to borrow even more money to rebuild from the war, and the nation and the people are back in debt to the private central banks for another 100 years. And that is the nature of the scam, and that's why as long as we have private central banks on this planet, there will be wars. I remember one of the matriarchs of the Rothschild family said that if her sons did not want wars, there would be no wars.
Well, I'm calling for the overthrow of the banking oligarchy non-violently, and I'm going to call for marches. I may not get anywhere. I'm a nobody, but I'm going to write, and I'm writing in peace, and I want it overthrown, because from their money emanates they try to take your free speech away. They buy out all these governments. They are the source of evil, Michael.
They absolutely are. And they've been playing this private central banking scam on the human race for 300 years. It has made the owners of these private central banks so rich, they don't appear on any of these lists of the world's richest people because they don't want to. The last thing they want is for the people of planet Earth to find out just how much real wealth has been sucked out of us all for little more than paper, colored ink, and numbers in a computer. What was it Henry Ford said? If people really understood how our banking system works, there'd be a revolution by morning.
Michael, if we didn't invent one thing more, we have the technology. We have walked on the moon. We have the technology now for agriculture, everything, to make the world better. I mean, what's happening? We're on the brink, and this scares the hell out of me. I'm sorry. The threat of nuclear war.
War is more profitable than peace. That's what it comes down to. As long as the control of the currency is in private, for-profit hands, they're going to go where the profit is. And there's much more profit in war than there is in peace. That's why when the U.S. government was set up, all the way back in 1770s, they didn't have a private central bank. The government was in charge of the currency, and of course the private banking families of Europe absolutely hated that, and they sicked their agent in place, Alexander Hamilton, to try and get the U.S. government plunged into debt to the other bankers and to get a charter for a bank in the United States that was allowed to issue their own banknotes, the first bank of the United States. And it plunged the nation into debt. Congress refused to renew the charter, and the Rothschilds literally convinced Britain to launch the War of 1812. And even though the United States won the War of 1812, it was in so much debt, they were forced to charter the second Bank of the United States. That one was shut down by Andrew Jackson, and there was an immediate attempt on his life. You need to read All Wars Are Banker Wars to understand just how much in the grip of these money junkies the entirety of the human race really is. Anyway, Jeff, we're going to let you go. We got a lot of calls, and I got a lot of news. I'm nowhere near the end of my talking points. We're going to go to Tom in Florida. Aloha, Tom. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I want to talk about the last caller you had a couple calls back. He was talking about the two rats. this guy Soros, if you notice, only one that's talked about what happened on Sunday when the election in Hungary was OAN, and Fox talked for 5 minutes, and OAN had it on for 15 minutes about what happened in Hungary. 71% of the voters voted for Orban, and this guy Soros spent hundreds of millions of dollars to try to swing that election. And the media is not talking about it because this guy Soros, who's a Hungarian Jew, by the way, he's actually trying to overthrow the Hungarian government, and Hungary said, no way. But the media doesn't want to talk about that, and that's the real situation that should be talked for the last week about what happened in Hungary, because the people in Hungary are woke up and say, no, we're not going to have this globalist fool, Soros, the rat, Dema rat, I don't know what rat he is, but he's a filthy rat. And that's what should be on the media every day, and not this crap about what's going on in Syria. And yeah, Michael, they're talking about Syria and this. Well, you know what? The United States, France, and England don't have to jump into that war. Let Israel handle it with Russia. Let Israel and Russia go at it. Why is the United States, England, and France going to jump into that kind of nonsense when they're already their countries are being decimated with illegal immigration and all this other nonsense? And you're going to go try to fight like a nuclear war against Russia, who's got twice the nuclear war heads that we have?
No, that's not accurate. That's not accurate. The U.S. has the U.S. has a slight margin in terms of the number of deployable warheads. We're not talking about the ones that are sitting in bunkers that haven't been fit to missiles or cruise missiles or anything yet. But in terms of actual deployable, we can use them right now, weapons. The U.S. has a slight advantage. Offsetting that is the fact that Russia, because of earlier issues of accuracy and aiming, they make their warheads a lot bigger, a lot more powerful.
They have more megatons. But Michael, let me ask you a question, Michael. It only takes one EMP over the middle of the country to take out anything. You don't have to drop 10, 20. You only have to drop one. So, I mean, what's the problem here? You know, why does the United States want to go against Russia in this nonsense? I mean, Syria and Israel always have been at it. So let Israel and Russia, if they want to defend Syria, let them go at it. Why is the United States, France, and England going to go into this kind of nincompoop stuff?
Okay, Tom, let's back up here a little bit. Okay, a nuclear weapon exploded outside the atmosphere over the middle of the United States would take out the civilian power grid. But ever since the EMP phenomenon was first discovered in the Pacific nuclear tests here in Hawaii, the military bases are hardened. EMP can't affect them. So if there's a nuclear exchange, Russia is going to aim for all of our military bases. They're going to take out any, where the bomber fields. They're going to try and hit all the missile silos. They're going to try and hit all the SSBNs. And that's why it will be more than just one bomb.
Well, exactly, Michael. You're 100% correct. But, Michael, let me ask you this. You know, talk about immigration and Soros, what he's trying to do to Europe and those the Rothschilds, whatever. Well, Michael, why doesn't Israel take in 4 or 5 million Arabs? They wanted to bring them here to the United States. They want to bring them from Somalia.
They want to kick out the Africans, even the Jewish Africans here right now. Anyway, listen, Tom, God let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back.
Okay, Michael. All righty.
Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Boy, we had a lot of callers today, and I've got a lot of stuff on my talking points that are going to have to roll into tomorrow. Let's go back to the phones to Dennis in Florida. Aloha, Dennis. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, thanks, Mike, for letting me contribute to your conversation. It's pretty overwhelming, everything that's going on, but it's nothing new. I mean, we're bombarded every day with brainwashing and being dumbed down and distracted. And I respect the fact you say whole show that people are going to resist this, but if we look, of course, obviously history shows us it doesn't matter how much the public resists. They're going to roll over and do exactly what they want, and we're just going to have to deal with it in the end. I mean, time and time again, they do what they want, and people either are brainwashed or willfully ignorant or don't have the backbone to push back the proper way.
Well, again, right now, the most important thing that we can do is be educating our fellow citizen over just how ridiculous the situation is and how really very dangerous it is. And we're going to have to tell people who don't want to pay attention, you need to pay attention, because if this spirals out of control, it is going to impact your life directly. And there's no question about that. But, you know, every once in a while in history, tyrants will take one step too far, and then they get into trouble, and they do trigger a backlash. Charles I would be a good example. Mussolini, Louis the 16th. Tyrants are not always immortal. In fact, Gandhi had this statement saying that there's always going to be tyrants, and for a time they can seem like they're invincible, but they always fall. And that is certainly true here as well. Now, I would have preferred going through an economic crash than a world war. But the end result is going to be the same, the destruction of the United States government, and we're going to have to get through it all and hopefully not get nuked in the process. And we have to be ready to start a new country in this land that goes back to those founding values in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights.
Michael, I've been very optimistic, and I can appreciate your optimism. And you know, there is going to be an answer at some point that we're going to have to decide and do. But in my true perspective, the way the liberal left is having this tidal wave of just dumbed down agendas and rolling through the political system. I mean, I hate to say it, but our society has changed. We're not the fighters we used to be. Through many methods, they've used many methods to do it to us. I mean, maybe it's, you know, it's justified, but I just don't see us having the backbone to push back anymore. I hate to say it, and I know that sounds disgusting. But
well, I think the conservatives definitely have the backbone. What I really think about liberalism and the snowflakes and the hypersensitivity and the microaggression and all that nonsense, these people are not going to be an effective fighting force. And what young people who are all gung-ho for the wars don't seem to realize, there will be a draft at some point. And they're going to get drafted, they're going to get put in uniform, they're going to be put out in the battlefields with a rifle, and all that screaming and crying about how unhappy they are is still not going to prevent them from being shot.
that's true. I would like to see the face on them then. But thank you so much. I know you're busy, Michael. Thank you for taking my call.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Roxanne in Texas. And Roxanne, I may have to take you through the commercial break. What's on your mind?
Hi, I'm going completely with my gut feeling, which is that they put all that military might in there, and they're going to unilaterally get rid of this ISIS crap for good. Bring the people home. Go that way. You'll sleep better.
Well, I disagree. I mean, General Wesley Clark basically blew the whistle that the U.S. agenda was to completely take control of the Middle East, either through regime change or direct military intervention, in order that the world would have to use U.S. dollars to buy that Mideast oil. And now they're gazing avariciously at Venezuela. And they need to do that because without the world having to use U.S. dollars to buy natural resources, the U.S. dollar is going to collapse. It's really not worth much of anything. If you take a ruble or a yuan in trade, you can go back to Russia and China and get manufactured goods and safe, healthy, organic agricultural produce. If you take a dollar in trade and you bring it to the U.S., there's not a lot that you can buy. It's overpriced junk, and of course our agriculture is all tainted with chemicals and GMO. And so that petrodollar is the only thing holding up the dollar's value around the world. And more countries are turning away from that. And so the U.S. solution is we're going to conquer the world and force them to go on using our particular piece of currency because that's the only way we can keep the economy going, which, by the way, is not going to work. The economy is going to implode anyway, no matter how much war they make.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I just have a different feeling, and I'll let you get back onto your show. Thank you.
All right, thanks an awful lot here. And I would love to be wrong. Don't misunderstand me. I'm not a war buff. I have been trying to head off this rush to a world war for the last third of my life. And I'd love to be wrong, but I don't think I am. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And we've had some comments on our phone calls today and more than a few emails pointing out that the corporate media is absolutely ignoring what's going on in Syria right now. And it reminds me very much of early 2001, where basically, early in the year, the international media was reporting that the U.S. was planning to invade Afghanistan in October. And it was not reported in the American corporate media. We got Gary Condit and Chandra Levy, and that was it. The media was just focused on that, and the American people were lured into being focused on that. They weren't paying attention to the foreign press, where it was already common knowledge the U.S. was planning to invade Afghanistan. So when 9/11 hit, it was a complete psychic shock to the American people. And we were off into Afghanistan before we knew what was happening. And this feels a lot like the same. Everybody knows that the military are pouring in for a confrontation in Syria, but it's not being reported on our corporate media. They're talking about Stapleton is saying his petition is fraudulent. They're talking about anti-India protests someplace else, and Kim Kardashian's latest fashion faux pas. And it does look to me like there's going to be something that happens that immediately leads into the attack on Syria that is intended to take the American people by surprise, to generate another psychic shock. Now, contrary to what some of the people who called into the show are saying, there are voices of reason and rationality within the U.S. power structure. Former Congressman, former presidential candidate Ron Paul is out there saying it's obviously another false flag. Virginia State Senator Richard Black is saying there was no chemical attack in Syria. Now, contrary to the neocon war propaganda, there is zero evidence of Assad ever using chemical weapons on his own people. It's been hoax after hoax after hoax. Assad gave up his chemical weapons under international supervision in a deal with international supervision. Who's got the chemical weapons in Syria? The U.S.-backed rebels. Now, the United Nations is already out there saying they're unable to independently verify the allegations of a chemical attack in Douma. So, Mattis is saying we haven't confirmed it. The UN is saying they can't confirm it. And still we're seeing this. We've got to get Assad. He's gassed his own people. Now, one of the articles that I posted to my website today, 56 false flag attacks officially admitted to. And these are cases where world leaders, years after the fact, have said, yeah, we did this. And there are 56 of these. And for every one of these that is officially acknowledged in the official record, there are probably dozens that remain hidden from view. And we need to remember, false flag attacks are a very common tool of foreign policy. It's not rare, it is not unusual, it is business as always. So. Now, a lot of people are admiring Tucker Carlson because he did this amazing broadcast yesterday where he laid it on out. This doesn't make sense. Why would Assad gas a hospital full of children when he's all but won the war against ISIS and Al-Qaeda? What does it get him? And the answer is obviously nothing. And Tucker Carlson apparently has come under intense pressure and criticism for daring to question the official story. And he reports that basically what he's getting from various politicians and war hawks is, just shut up and obey. That's what they want. They're not going to get their world war unless the American people can be convinced to shut up and obey. And so we can't shut up. We can't afford to shut up. We have to send a message to the world that we are not on board with this policy of the United States government. Otherwise, our future generations will live with the same collective shame and guilt and stigma that generations of Germans did after World War II. And I don't want that for future generations of Americans. I want future generations of Americans to look back and say, look, this insanity was all because of some people in the government who thought World War III was going to be really kind of cool because it was going to get them in the history books and they were going to get very rich off of it. And it didn't really matter how much they impoverished the American people or how many people died in the war. Now, as you know, Israel carried out a bombing attack, a missile attack on a base in Syria. Israel said it was an Iranian base. Syria is saying it's a Syrian base, but there were Iranians there. who were killed, and now Iran is saying that Israel will face a response over the air base attack. And in response, Israel is saying they're going to terminate Iran's presence in Syria. They're threatening to go on in and blow up any place where they think Iranians might be. And who cares if civilians are getting killed? We serve a higher purpose here. Apparently, again, in Israel, let's see, senior security officials, if Iran acts against Israel, will topple Assad. There it is again. That's the real agenda. Getting rid of Assad and putting him in with replacing him with a government that is favorable to the U.S., obedient to the U.S., obedient to Israel. Israel wants a new government in Syria that will say, sure, you can have the Golan Heights. Who cares? Now, earlier in the week, there was a story that the USS Donald Cook was being harassed by Russian jets in Syrian waters. The U.S. Navy is saying that story is totally bogus. And it would be very reckless for Russia to do something that provocative at this point. I think Putin is still hoping that there can be found some way to diffuse the situation without having to lose face in the process. And that's really what it comes on down to. Putin can't back down, or his own hardliners will turn on him. Trump can't back down. He's not in control of our foreign policy. Story coming out of Sana. Once again, U.S. helicopters have been discovered evacuating leaders of Daesh from Tal al-Shayar and Hasaka. Another reminder that ISIS is, ISIL, whatever they call themselves this week, works for the United States of America. You're paying for all this. You're paying for both sides of what's going on. Now, the Free Syria Army is now demanding that U.S. military forces back them up to storm the Syrian army positions in Deir ez-Zor. So they're talking about American boots on the ground invading Syria. It's an act of war. It's absolutely an act of war. And Syria has done nothing to justify this. The United States has no legitimate reason to be in Syria. It's a war of conquest. Congress has not approved it. There's no United Nations Security Council resolution that supports it. This is outright naked aggression on the part of the United States government. And we all need to remember that. We all need to share that with everybody around us. I know it is a bitter pill to swallow, but as we go into this world war, it's the United States who's the bad guy. And I fear that 50 years from now, the Stars and Stripes are going to be as reviled then as the swastika is today. And that is something also I would like future generations of Americans not to have to live with. Meanwhile, the Syrian army has captured a number of British military men in eastern Ghouta. Apparently they were being held captive by the Syrian army, and they're trying to figure out why they were there. What are they doing? Well, they're operating as advisors. But there are a lot of foreign actors inside Syria right now. So getting on back to the nerve agent saga, questions are being asked, are the Skripals being held against their will in Britain? And it certainly seems like that, because the British government just issued a statement that Yulia Skripal is refusing to communicate with the Russian consulate, refusing to have any more phone calls with Victoria, and wants to be left alone because she's still suffering the ill effects of the whatever poison they fell victim to. I don't think this is coming from Yulia. They don't dare let her talk with anybody. She might confirm that it was in fact a case of food poisoning from that seafood risotto that apparently they both ordered at that Zizi's restaurant. And remember, when this case first came on out, they said, oh, they were poisoned at the restaurant and other people were poisoned with them. And then all of a sudden the story changed. Oh, the poison was on the doorknob of their home. And that story didn't fly because it was 7 hours from the time they left their home to the point where they were found ill on that park bench. And Novichok works much faster than that. The shellfish poisoning makes the most sense that seafood risotto is a very common source of shellfish poisoning. And the symptoms that were described when they were found line up with that. And I think the Skripals were made sick by this food, and somebody said, well, we can spin the story to attack and smear Russia. Russia tried to assassinate these two with this nerve agent, bad Russia, bad Russia, bad Russia. And now it does look like they're going to grab the Skripals. They're taking them to an undisclosed location in the United States, supposedly with new identities. For all we know, they're on their way to Guantanamo. Because the United States and Great Britain dares not let them talk to anybody at this point. Apparently, there were some loud explosions over the Saudi Arabia capital, Riyadh, and there were 3 separate explosions. It may have been missiles coming in from Yemen, which supposedly were intercepted this time. Down in Israel, they're still trying to get out from the fact that they were shooting at journalists. And yesterday they were claiming, well, they may have been Hamas terrorists merely dressed up as journalists, which didn't really fly. Now, of course, even though they're acknowledging that the photojournalist who was killed was in fact working as a salaried reporter, Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman said, well, he was a terrorist anyway. Doesn't matter if he's also a reporter, he had to be a terrorist. Oh, really? How do you know he's a terrorist? Well, we only shoot terrorists, and he's dead, so obviously he had to be a terrorist. Little circular logic. And if you don't believe us, you're a filthy Jew-hating anti-Semite who wants Hitler to come back and gas the Jewish babies in the ovens. Now, Great Britain has joined the chorus of condemnation over the Passover massacre, but this article over in The Independent is saying, well, if Great Britain is so appalled by the killing of unarmed protesters in Gaza, maybe it's time to stop selling arms to Israel. And in fact, Jeremy Corbyn is out there saying it's time to review British arms sales to Israel because Israel is not using them for the purposes that they claim. Usually arms sales will have contractual obligations, what the arms are to be used for. That's certainly true with United States arms sales to Israel. They're supposed to be for defensive purposes only, and then Israel uses them for offense, which should invalidate the contract. But again, whatever Israel wants, Israel gets from the government of the United States of Israel. I'm sorry, United States of America here. Meanwhile, Israel's Labor Party has broken off relations with Jeremy Corbyn, saying that he's anti-Semitic and he shows hostility toward Israeli policies. Well, I'm sorry, but when Israel is out there on the border with Gaza shooting unarmed protesters simply for protesting, yeah, that's a policy I think we can all be hostile towards. It's perfectly reasonable for us to be hostile toward that kind of a policy. But Israel's out there just trying to shut down anybody and everything that challenges what they do, no matter how many war crimes they commit, no matter how many atrocities they commit. Now, China is in communication of the government of Vanuatu, which is in the South Pacific. They want to build a permanent military base on the South Pacific island nation. This would add to Beijing's expanding list of foreign military bases and position the Chinese 1,200 miles from Australia, which is probably going to make Australia very, very nervous. Meanwhile, warplanes from the People's Liberation Army's Eastern Theater Command are conducting drills over rugged terrain in western China to simulate battle conditions over Taiwan. And they're saying it's probable the planes will be sent into actual battle. So there's another flashpoint for World War III. Interesting little development as we talk about the upcoming meeting between Moon Jae-in and Kim Jong-un and Donald Trump. Apparently, Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has accepted an invitation to visit North Korea and meet with Kim Jong-un. So there could be a real monkey wrench in the works if North Korea and Russia pivot together. That would make it much more problematic for the United States to go on in and continue tinkering with North Korea. Now, over in the White House, Trump's Homeland Security Advisor, Tom Bossert, has resigned. And apparently this was under pressure from John Bolton, who, as National Security Advisor, shouldn't be in charge of White House staffing. That's normally the job of Chief of Staff. But apparently Bolton is in there throwing his weight around and trying to get the last of the people who are opposed to war removed. So the White House will be all war all the time, and Donald Trump won't be able to do anything about it. Meanwhile, over at the United Nations, Canadian humanitarian worker Peter Daglish, who helped found the charity Street Kids International, has been arrested in Nepal for pedophilia. And this guy is considered one of the world's leading experts on humanitarian work with children, was a former senior United Nations official. It's a reminder the kind of people who seek these positions of power and authority. Now, Iran, pardon me, is starting to limit foreign currency holdings outside the banks. They're very concerned that the Iranian people are taking their money out of the banks and taking it home, and it's creating a liquidity crunch. So Iran has now gone the route of saying, you must keep most of your money in the banks where we can get it in an emergency. Now, we don't have laws like that here yet, but I expect as a form of currency control, we may eventually see something like that here. Meanwhile, it turns out Israel is secretly buying oil from Iraqi Kurdistan using the same transit that was used for stolen ISIS oil. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we will be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And apparently, there's been an update on that Navy Poseidon P-8 that's been orbiting near Tartus and Latakia. And according to this article coming out of Zero Hedge, they may be hunting for Russian submarines. They don't know if Russia has submarines in the areas. They may be trying to find them, which is a very, very difficult thing to do if the submarines are below the thermocline. So everybody's gearing up, a lot of hardware in the area. So let's basically recap where we are right now. And again, it is very important that we share this information with each other, that we educate our fellow citizens who still have not quite broken away from the matrix of the corporate media. The U.S. was losing in Syria. Trump was talking about leaving. And all of a sudden, Netanyahu and the generals and the cabinet said, no, no, we have to go on in. We can't lose in Syria, or the whole long-term war agenda is at risk. And so Trump does a flip-flop, says he regrets it, and they're back talking about going into Syria. And just when he needs it, there is the allegation of a chemical weapon attack against a hospital in Douma filled with children. And we get this video from the white helmets of these kids being hosed down and having these little aspirators, these asthma nebulizers shoved into their mouth and spritzed. And the kids are all crying, but they don't seem to show any signs of actual chemical weapon burns. And except for face masks, the so-called emergency responders are taking no protection whatsoever. They're not wearing gloves. And if the kids had actually been hit with sarin, touching them without gloves, you would get the sarin as well. And the story just doesn't make any sense. Assad's on the verge of victory. Why would he do something like that? Why would he hit a hospital full of kids? It doesn't make any sense. It never did. But on the basis of that lie, and both the United States and the United Nations are now admitting they can't confirm it actually happened, Trump is ratcheting up a major attack on Syria. And this, of course, is bringing us directly into conflict with Russia. And there's a lot of weaponry off the coast of Syria right now, and I'm sure Russia is bringing down a lot of their stuff as well. This could be the beginning of World War III for real. As I told that other caller, I hope I'm wrong. I hope somebody knuckles under. But I don't think so. The neocons, going all the way back to the 1990s and the Project for the New American Century, they literally dream of a world dominated by U.S. military power. And they were out there saying it literally was going to be a century of unending war to bring the world under the control of the United States of America. Of course, the Nazis claimed their Reich was going to last 1,000 years, and it only lasted 12. But it's obviously a dangerous situation. And we have to do everything that we can do legally to express our disapproval and opposition. Calling members of Congress, calling the media, going on out and responding to polls, sharing this information. We have to send the message out to the rest of the world. We, the American people, do not believe the lies of the U.S. government. We do not support the wars of the U.S. government. We are appalled. We are ashamed by what the U.S. government is doing. The U.S. government is sinning. There's the music. Time for me to get out of here. Stay tuned for John Stadmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.